60-ton iconic altar stone at the heart of Stonehenge originated from northeastern Scotland rather than southwest Wales. The discovery shows that its construction was a far greater collaborative effort.
Decades, Stonehenge has baffled the world. A circle of massive stones rising from the English countryside, guarding secrets no one can fully unlock. Some say it was a temple for sun worship, others an ancient burial site, a healing ground, or even a prehistoric calendar. But how did people 4,000 years ago, without machines, drag 25-ton stones from Wales, 150 miles away? How did they raise and balance those lintels so perfectly? And the biggest question of all, why build it in the first place? After centuries, the mystery may finally be cracked, and the answer changes everything. A monument, built without wheels. Lying some 150 kilometers west of London, in the wide-open Wiltshire countryside, stands one of the world's greatest enigmas, Stonehenge. At first glance, it looks like nothing more than a circle of giant stones scattered across Salisbury Plain. But the moment you look closer, you realize this isn't just any pile of rocks. It's older than the pyramids, older than the Roman Empire itself, and for centuries, its purpose has been fiercely debated. Now, archaeologists believe they may finally have an answer to this mind-bending riddle. So what exactly did they discover? Keep watching, because the story of Stonehenge reaches back almost 9,000 years, and it still refuses to surrender all its secrets. Through time, it has been reimagined as many things: a temple, a burial ground, a meeting place, even a vast celestial clock. But no matter what role it played, it has always carried one constant: meaning. Every generation that gathered around it, rebuilt it, or simply gazed at it, inscribed their own beliefs onto its mystery. And still, the fascination hasn't faded. More than 1 million visitors arrive each year, some to marvel at its sheer age and impossible construction, others to witness the breathtaking moment when the sun rises or sets in perfect alignment with the stones. A cosmic spectacle designed by ancient people with no telescopes, no satellites, only a relentless drive to make sense of the heavens. But here's the kicker. The people who first began work on Stonehenge in the 4th millennium, before the Common Era, weren't just farmers with spare time. They were contemporaries of the first dynasties of ancient Egypt, building something that not only predates the pyramids, but has somehow endured millennia. And the story of its construction? It didn't happen all at once. It came in phases, each one adding layers of wonder and confusion. The first phase, around 3,100 before the Common Era began, not with towering stones but with a ditch. Dug 6 feet deep and stretching 360 feet across, it formed a circle with 2 entrances, one to the northeast and a smaller one to the south. Within it, 56 pits were dug, later called Aubrey holes, after the 17th century archaeologist who discovered them. These holes may have once held upright bluestones or timber posts. If they were bluestones, that's already mind-blowing, because each one weighed up to 4 tons and came from the Preseli Hills in Wales, approximately 250 miles away. Imagine hauling that kind of weight with nothing but ropes and wooden sledges. A century or two later, Phase 2 began. This time, wooden posts were raised in the center of the henge, possibly even forming a roofed structure. But this phase also turned Stonehenge into something darker, a burial site. At least 25 of the Aubrey holes were reused to hold cremated remains, and another 30 burials were placed in and around the henge's ditch. Most of those buried were men in their prime, healthy and relatively unscarred by labor. Whoever they were, being laid to rest here meant status. Maybe the earliest rulers of Britain? Maybe leaders whose power stretched into ceremony and belief. Then came the showstopper. Phase 3, which was roughly 400 to 500 years later. This was when Stonehenge transformed into the monument we recognize today. Gone were the modest wooden posts and small stones. In their place, a massive circle of 30 sarsen stones was erected, each weighing 25 tons and standing over 13 feet tall. These stones came from Marlborough Downs, about 20 miles away. Still no small feat. To top it off, horizontal lintels were lifted into place with astonishing precision, locked together with tongue-and-groove joints, the kind of carpentry tricks you'd expect in fine woodworking, not giant megaliths. Inside the circle stood the real giants, 5 trilithons, pairs of uprights capped with lintels, arranged in a horseshoe formation. The tallest stood nearly 24 feet high and weighed around 50 tons. Think about that for a second. 50 tons of solid stone, balanced so perfectly it still stands today. Around them, bluestones were set in patterns, some inside, some outside, while a processional avenue stretched out toward the River Avon, linking Stonehenge to the landscape like a ceremonial pathway. But what makes this phase even more incredible are the details. The builders weren't just stacking stones, they were shaping an experience. Each upright was carefully dressed, with the sides facing inward, polished smoother than those facing out. The sarsens were subtly tapered toward the top so they'd look uniform from the ground. The lintels curved gently to echo the circle below. The trilithons increased in height toward the southwest, pulling the eye inward, giving the whole arrangement a kind of drama, as if the stones themselves were part of a performance staged for the skies. So who were the masterminds? Archaeology hasn't given us all the answers. Remains of Neolithic villages nearby show simple farming communities, not hierarchical societies with kings or pharaohs. If leaders existed, they've left little trace. That suggests something almost unthinkable for the ancient world, that the first builders of Stonehenge worked together not out of forced labor, but out of shared vision. A collective effort so great it rewrote what was possible for humanity at the time. And yet, the burials from the second phase suggest that by then, social status had begun to creep in. To be buried at Stonehenge meant you mattered. These men may have been the first political elite of Britain, leaders whose influence stretched beyond their lives. By the third phase, though, the society behind Stonehenge had gone from simple farmers to a people capable of staggering technical mastery. Their refinements weren't just practical. They were psychological, designed to control what you saw, how you felt, and how you moved within the circle. Thousands of years later, the questions still linger. Who planned it? Why there? And most haunting of all, why build something so impossibly ambitious at all? Was it religion, power, astronomy, or healing? Or was it something deeper, something we'll never fully understand? Whatever the answer, one thing is certain. Stonehenge wasn't just built to stand the test of time. It was built to astonish, and it still does. But if the stones themselves leave us in awe, the silence around them leaves us restless. No writings, no records, no clear explanation. Just mystery stacked upon mystery daring us to speculate. Speculations surrounding the Stonehenge. Stonehenge is one of history's greatest riddles because it comes from a culture that left behind no written records, no blueprints, no journals, no notes passed down, just giant stones arranged in a way that continues to baffle us. And because of that silence, every single detail about it, how it was built, why it was built, what it was meant to do, is still up for debate. Naturally, myths have swirled around it for centuries, and the deeper you look, the stranger it gets. Here's one of the first things people notice. The stones are aligned in ways that feel too deliberate to be coincidence. The great trilithon, the famous horseshoe of 5 central arches, the heel stone, even the avenue leading away from the site. They all line up with the sunset on the winter solstice and the sunrise on the summer solstice. That kind of precision doesn't happen by accident. Some think the land itself, shaped naturally along that line, inspired the builders to turn the spot into something extraordinary. Others believe it wasn't just a monument, but a giant prehistoric observatory, capable of predicting eclipses, solstices, and equinoxes that mattered deeply to the belief systems of the time. And yet, when archaeologists dug beneath the site, what they found told a very different story. Piles of animal bones, carefully culled, hint that gatherings here may have happened in the dark, cold months of winter, not summer. So maybe this wasn't just about chasing the sun. Maybe it was about surviving the darkness, finding ritual in the harshest season, or honoring the dead when the year was at its lowest ebb. The real kicker, though, is the question of how. These stones are impossibly heavy, some up to 50 tons. For centuries, people leaned on myths to explain it. Giants, sorcery, even Merlin the magician. After all, how else could you explain dragging stones that size across hundreds of miles? But over time, experiments have shown that it was possible, even with Neolithic technology. Some theories involve logs rolled into makeshift tracks, with stones dragged inch by inch across the land. Others imagine sleighs pulled along wooden rails greased with animal fat to ease the journey. In fact, in 1995, a group of more than 100 people managed to move a 40-ton stone across 18 miles near Stonehenge, using nothing but a sleigh and sheer determination. Slow? Yes. Impossible? Not at all. And while we're on the subject of purpose, Stonehenge has no shortage of theories. In the 1960s, Gerald Hawkins mapped out the site and argued that its layout was essentially a giant astronomical calendar designed to track the sun and moon over a recurring 56-year cycle. Fast forward, and newer ideas have pushed things in an entirely different direction. Archaeologists Jeffrey Wainwright and Timothy Darville have argued that Stonehenge was nothing less than a place of healing, the ancient equivalent of Lourdes. They point to the unusually high number of burials in the area and the evidence of physical trauma in some of the skeletons. Maybe people came here not to worship the stars, but to mend their bodies and spirits. Others, like Mike Parker Pearson of Sheffield University, lean towards something more symbolic. He suggests Stonehenge was part of a larger ritual landscape paired with Durrington Walls, a nearby site linked by avenues and the River Avon. According to this theory, Durrington Walls was the land of the living, while Stonehenge was the land of the dead. Traveling down the river toward the stones would have symbolized a passage from life into death, honoring both ancestors and the newly deceased. The bones found nearby back up the idea that this wasn't just a local affair. Isotope analysis reveals that people buried at Stonehenge came from far and wide. One teenage boy, who died around 1550 BC, had grown up near the Mediterranean. Another, the so-called Amesbury Archer, from 2300 BC, was raised in the Alpine foothills of Germany. The Boscombe Bowman likely came from Wales or even Brittany, France. In other words, people traveled incredible distances to be here, treating Stonehenge as something special, something worth the journey. And then there's another theory: Stonehenge as a symbol of peace and unity. Researchers have pointed out that around the time of its construction, Britain's Neolithic people were unusually unified. Different groups and regions weren't just coexisting, they were collaborating. Perhaps the act of building something so massive, so permanent, was itself a way of declaring, "We are one." Even the stones themselves seem to whisper their own mysteries. The smaller blue stones, dragged some 140 miles from Wales, turned out to have unusual acoustic properties. Strike them, and they ring out like bells. In fact, in the Welsh village of Manclocog, literally meaning ringing stones. Locals used these very blue stones as church bells up until the 18th century. Imagine dragging such stones across hundreds of miles, not just because they were heavy or strong, but because they sang. Some ancient cultures believed ringing stones contained mystical or healing powers, and if that's true, then the blue stones of Stonehenge weren't just rocks. They were instruments of ritual, tools for transformation. The mystery of the blue stone. When you look at Stonehenge, it's easy to think of it as one single monument, but really, it's made of two very different types of stone, each with its own strange journey: the hulking sarsens and the smaller, but no less mysterious, blue stones. The sarsens are the giants. They're a type of silcrete rock scattered across southern England, but for the longest time no one could say exactly where Stonehenges came from. Some guess they were dragged from the Marlborough Downs, about 20 miles away. Recently, though, geochemical tests cracked the code. Most of the sarsens were pinpointed to a single place, Westwoods, just southwest of Marlborough. Imagine it. Ancient builders trekking through dense woodland, choosing their stones carefully, then somehow hauling blocks weighing around 25 tons each. The heel stone, one of the most iconic pieces, tips the scale at about 30 tons on its own. That's the weight of 5 elephants, balanced upright on a grassy plain by people with nothing more than ropes, wood, and sheer willpower. Then there are the blue stones. Smaller, yes, but no less fascinating. These rocks, weighing between 2 and 5 tons apiece, came all the way from the Preseli Hills in southwest Wales, roughly 140 miles away. Freshly broken or soaked by rain, they show a bluish tint, which is where they get their name. And unlike the sarsens, the blue stones seem to have lived many lives. Evidence suggests some once stood in a stone circle by the River Avon at West Amesbury Henge, just a mile from Stonehenge. Others may have originally formed part of an even older circle at Wan Mawn, back in their native Preseli Hills. Excavations there revealed empty stone holes like ghosts of missing pillars, as if someone carefully removed them and carried them across Britain to replant them at Stonehenge. When the blue stones first arrived, they weren't arranged as we see them today. They stood in arcs of double holes, called the Q and R holes, before being shuffled and rearranged into the outer circle and inner horseshoe we know now. And then there's the altar stone. Different again. A sandstone slab hauled from southeast Wales near the Brecon Beacons. Each rock seems to have its own story, its own origin point, and somehow they all converged here in one of the most baffling collaborations of the ancient world. What's even wilder is how much evidence remains of the stoneworking itself. To the north of the monument, archaeologists have found piles of sarsen and bluestone fragments, along with hammerstones of flint and sarsen used to shape the blocks. The big hammers chipped away at rough edges, while smaller ones smoothed the surfaces. And thanks to modern laser surveys, we can now see the difference in craftsmanship. Some sides of Stonehenge are rugged and raw, while others, especially the northeast side and the inner faces of the great trilithons, were dressed with extraordinary care, polished like they were meant to impress. And then there's the engineering magic. These weren't just rocks piled together. The builders carved mortise holes into the tops of upright stones and shaped protruding tenons to slot perfectly into the horizontal lintels, just like woodworkers use tongue and groove joints. Except here, they were carving joints into 25-ton blocks of stone. That level of precision is staggering. To stand a stone upright, they dug a wide hole with a sloping side, reinforced the back with stakes, then hauled the block into position using ropes and probably a wooden A-frame. They may have even used weights to help tip the stone upright before packing the base with rubble to hold it steady. As for the lintels, the most likely method was building timber platforms, raising the stones higher and higher until they could rest on top. Only then did the builders finish shaping the tenons to ensure the lintel snapped perfectly into place. Think about that for a second. Technology we associate with carpentry applied on a scale so massive it's almost unthinkable. Stonehenge isn't just a monument, it's proof that the people who built it were not primitive at all. They were engineers, artists, and problem solvers who understood strength, balance, and precision in ways that still leave us stunned. Every hammer mark, every joint, every towering stone whispers the same question across the centuries. How far would you go to turn vision into reality? But even with all that brilliance, one mystery refused to fade. How did those stones, some weighing as much as 30 tons, actually arrive on Salisbury Plain? For decades, the debate raged between nature and human hands, until recently when a forgotten rock changed everything. So, Stonehenge's mystery finally solved. For nearly 100 years, the Newall boulder sat forgotten for almost a century. Just another lump of rock pulled from the soil at Stonehenge back in 1924. But a new study has now flipped the script, suggesting this football-sized stone might actually hold the missing clue to one of history's biggest puzzles: how those colossal stones really got to Salisbury Plain. Researchers at Aberystwyth University concluded that Neolithic people themselves hauled the Newall boulder all the way from Wales to Wiltshire. The study cast aside the long-debated glacial theory, insisting there was no evidence that it was simply an ice-dumped erratic. Instead, chemical tests showed the boulder's geology matched rocks from Craig Rossi Feline in Wales, more than 125 miles away. Even more telling, its surface was coated in calcium carbonate, a sign of human transport. If glaciers had been responsible, identical fragments would be scattered across the landscape. Yet, the pieces only appear around one place: Stonehenge. The research went further, uncovering that another buried stone, known as 32nd D, wasn't spotted dolerite as once believed, but the same foliated rhyolite as the Newall boulder. Together, the findings hammer home one fact. The true wonder of Stonehenge isn't just its towering stones, but the staggering effort it took to drag them from Wales without the help of modern tools. Some weighed up to 3.5 tons, yet they still made the journey. While a small minority continue to cling to the glacier theory, the evidence stacks neatly on the side of human hands. If ice had moved the stones, fragments would be scattered across Salisbury Plain, but that's not the case. Instead, they cluster only at Stonehenge, a giant clue left in plain sight. As the researchers summed it up, the monument itself is proof of deliberate human movement. Unless one believes the stones just happen to lie perfectly in order, the only explanation is that people dragged, placed, and raised them with intention. For centuries, people have wondered if Stonehenge was the work of nature, gods, or man. With this discovery, the answer is clearer than ever. It was people, and the mystery of how those mighty stones arrived may have finally been cracked. Have you ever seen Stonehenge in real life? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.